Well, hello everyone. We're open tonight for fun and so glad to see you here. This is Talk More Talk solo video Beatles webcast. And I got to say that although we talk mostly about solo stuff, this is going to be a special one where we're talking about the Beatles, which happens from time to time here on the show, because of course we all know the 50th anniversary edition came out of Abbey Road, and we're going to be talking about that. And you might know me from my YouTube channel. I go by the name of Mean Mr. Mayo, but you can call me Joe Mayo. All my friends do. So, happy to be here moderating my first show here. And the show, by the way, is on bi-weekly, every other Monday. Okay, you can catch us. So I'm going to introduce my three co-hosts. I'm going to start out with somebody that we know who is frequently called the queen of all Beatles media. I call her Sun Queen for short. She's the author of two books, Songs We Were Singing, Guided Tours through the Beatles' lesser-known tracks, and also Michael Jackson, FAQ, All That's Left to Know About the King of Pop. And she also writes Deep Beatles, a column for Something Else Reviews. It's Kid O'Toole.
Hey,
Welcome.
hey, Joe, and hi, everybody. And I'm going to have to apologize in advance tonight. I'm fighting off a cold, those Rochester, New York germs, And so my voice may be going a little in and out tonight. So,
Kermit O'Toole. Kermit the Frog O'Toole. Okay. And also, straight to you from Arizona, we have someone who has a Paul McCartney podcast called Two Legs, along with his new co-host, Andy Nichols, none other than Tom Hunyadi. Hello, my friend.
Hey, Joe Mayo. Hello, how you doing? Ken, Kit, also, I guess we can also call her the queen of red lipstick as well.
I'm wearing the lipstick.
Yes.
Okay. And, last here, but by no means least, we have someone who is well known for close to 40 years, a syndicated radio program called Every Little Thing. Also part of a podcast, one of the hosts called Things We Said Today, none other than Mr. Ken Michaels. Hey,
Hi,
Ken.
Joe. Hi, everyone. And I'm going to call you Queen of the Hop this time. I'm in a 50s mood.
All right.
Okay. You have many titles.
I've got more to add to my business card. Awesome.
So I know that, this is going to be a really big shoe tonight because, of course, the topic is so interesting, and I'm sure everybody out there is going to be wanting to weigh in on this, where you can come and you could type, your comments. That's part of what this is. You participate and type out what things you want to ask or comment on what you think of this or that. So there's going to be a lot to get to, but we think we're going to start, as we usually do, with the news from Ken Michaels, and we've got a pretty busy news day, I think, Ken, huh?
You're not kidding. I mean, when you're doing a show bi-weekly, in 2 weeks, a lot of news can accumulate, but I'll try to cover as much as I can, as quickly as I can. First of all, as you all know, October 27th was the big day when the box set for the 50th anniversary of Abbey Road was released, amongst rave reviews all over the media, with, of course, a remix from Giles Martin and 2 discs of outtakes. The previous day was the actual 50th anniversary of its release in the UK, and there was a big party held at Abbey Road Studios with Paul and Ringo celebrating with their wives, and Olivia Harrison was there, as well as Giles Martin. Everyone who attended got to hear the album in a new Dolby Atmos mix with 21 speakers placed around the room.
Wow. Damn.
And this was designed to give listeners an immersive experience, they say, showing a new width and depth to the music. Also that day, hundreds of fans, as you would imagine, walked across the zebra crossing to recreate their own takes of the now famous album cover. If you're wondering how well Abbey Road is selling, the big news is that it has just topped the official albums chart in the UK.
Yep.
And in the US, it returns to the number 3 position on the Billboard Top 200 for sales of 81,000 equivalent album units, with 70,000 of those in album sales. So I guess the remainder are digital sales. Okay. So all the box sets have been doing well. Sgt. Pepper, The White Album, and now Abbey Road, all making the top 10. Very impressive for an album 50 years old, number 3 in America. For those of you who look for exclusive deals, Target is now offering a special bundle package. If you buy the Abbey Road album on vinyl, you'll get a large Abbey Road t-shirt with it, which all of us could use, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, it's always
Yeah.
it's always interesting to see how well the physical media sales do as opposed to the digital sales, because if the digital sales ever eclipse the physical media sales, then I think we're going to be in a little bit of trouble.
why is that? That'll mean younger people are buying it.
Well,
Younger
that means I won't have this in my hands, though, possibly.
Oh,
Come on.
let's hope they don't phase that out. So.
Yes.
So, more news. Paul and wife Nancy followed the Abbey Road celebrations by attending Paris Fashion Week on September 30th. The couple were seen at Opera Garnier in Paris, and they were there to support Stella's new fashion line for the summer and fall for 2020. While in France, Paul and Nancy also visited the Union Libérale Israélite de France, which is a liberal Jewish synagogue in Paris. Okay, some concert information. The show called It Was 50 Years Ago Today, which is a salute to the Beatles' White Album by a super group that boasts Todd Rundgren, Jason Scheff from Chicago, Joey Molland of Badfinger, Mickey Dolenz of the Monkees, and Christopher Cross. That tour is currently underway, and it's going through December in the United States. Also, a Yoko Ono retrospective art exhibit called, I love this title, Remembering the Future. That's kind of like things we said today, in the lyrics to that. Remembering the Future. That's running right now through October 27th at the Everson Museum in Syracuse. Couple of things concerning Harry Nilsson, since many Beatle fans are Nilsson fans. The last recordings that Harry worked on are coming out on an album called Lost and Found, spelled L-O-S-S-T, Lost and Found. Mark Hudson produced the album, and it includes appearances from Van Dyke Parks, Jimmy Webb, the great songwriter, Jim Keltner, and also Harry's son Kifo, who plays bass on the album. And that's due out November the 22nd. You can pre-order it right now on Amazon. Along with that comes word that Harry's animated children's film, The Point, will be celebrating its 50th anniversary by being released for the first time ever on HD and Blu-ray, and an Ultimate Edition, which includes both previously available bonus material and brand new material produced exclusively for this release. You're going to have to wait a little while for it. It's not coming out until February 11th. It's available from MVD Entertainment. So lots of news there on the Harry Nilsson front. And also a good friend of ours, Neil Innes of Ruddles fame and the Bonzo Dog Band fame. He's just released a new solo album called Nearly Really. It's not easy to say. It's been released on CD, and you can get it at neilinnes.media or nearlyreally.com. Ken McNabb's recent book exploring in detail the tumultuous and eventful year of 1969 for the Beatles, called And in the End, has just been released in paperback form. There are rumors, just rumors at this point, about Paul McCartney playing in Glastonbury for the festival next year and possibly returning to Tel Aviv in 2020. Now, we do have some sad news on three major passings for Beatle fans. First of all, Peter Sissons, the former BBC journalist, has died at the age of 77. Peter went to school with John, Paul, and George. And Paul made a statement on Facebook calling him his old schoolmate from the Liverpool Institute. He said they stayed in touch as time went by and followed their own separate careers. Paul's quoted as saying, "He was a talented news presenter with a great sense of humor. I will miss him, but always have fond memories of the time we spent together." There's a photo you may have seen before of John with a bunch of boys swimming when they were children. And right to the left of John is Peter Sissons. And to the right of him is Jimmy Tarbuck, who became a very popular comedian in England. He's still alive. So if you're familiar with that photo, Peter is to the left of John. Also, there's actress Anna Quayle. She was known for being in the BBC children's TV show Grange Hill, also in the films Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and Casino Royale. And to Beatle fans, she will always be remembered for her role in A Hard Day's Night. She played a woman called Millie, who recognizes John Lennon in a hallway going undercover. And you all know that dialogue. We've all repeated it time and time again. You look just like him, and all that.
That's
She
one of
looks
my
more like.
favorite scenes, actually.
What's that?
It's one of my favorite scenes, actually.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's great.
She looks more like him than I do.
Yep. How many people watching this show right now have gone through those lines and memorized it and say it over and over?
Yep.
So Anna, she passed away at age 86 after battling dementia. She actually died on August the 16th, but the news only came out recently.
Oh.
And then finally, we all have heard about Ginger Baker, the great drummer who was in Cream and Blind Faith. There are Beatle connections to Ginger Baker while recording the Band on the Run album in Lagos, Nigeria. Ginger actually invited Wings to record at his own studios called Arc Studios, which was in Ikeja, 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 and they recorded Picasso's last words there. Also, Denny Lane was in Ginger Baker's Air Force, his band, for a brief time in 1971, I think the year was. And Paul issued this statement on Twitter: Ginger Baker, great drummer, wild and lovely guy. Sad to hear that he died, but the memories never will. And Ringo said, God bless Ginger Baker, incredible musician, wild and inventive drummer, peace and love to his family. And in Rolling Stone magazine, Ringo remembered that a few times Ginger joined Ringo and the All-Stars on stage when Jack Bruce was in the band.
Wow. Okay.
And Ringo actually introduced Ginger on stage by saying, ladies and gentlemen, 2% cream.
I didn't know that.
So, that's in Rolling Stone. And speaking of Ringo, a reminder, his new album, What's My Name, comes out October 25th, just a couple weeks away. We should also be hearing pretty soon about the next McCartney remaster.
Right. Yeah.
Just thinking about that because, he's been consistent every year since Band on the Run, putting out one or two titles. It's now October. Should be coming out November or December, so we'll be hearing something
holidays.
soon.
Word on the street that it should be either later this week or next week.
Okay, you've heard that.
We're talking Flaming Pie, right?
That's the last I heard.
Yeah.
The rumors were London Town and Back to the Egg for a while, and then a couple months ago they started saying it was Flaming Pie. So we shall see.
The team is doing a good job of keeping us all in suspense.
That's for sure.
Okay, that's it for the news.
All right.
Okay, thanks a lot, Ken. Listen, Kit, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Abbey Road conference that you went to and how that went?
Yes,
tell us all about it.
Yeah, I mean, it was really an incredible experience. It was very different from the Monmouth conference from last November. This was a little smaller, but it was at the Eastman School of Music in Rochester, New York. And I mean, first of all, it was just a thrill to be there. I mean, that's one of the finest music schools in the country, and so it was just really just a thrill to be there. There were just so many incredible presentations. Ken Womack, our own Ken Womack, was there, and he did a discussion about the Abbey Road medley and George Martin's role in it. He did a presentation on that. He also led a discussion with Ken Townsend, who I'm sure many of you know, an engineer at Abbey Road and later on became the general manager. And he was truly the nicest guy. I got to have dinner with him the night before we were all leaving to go back home. We were staying at the same hotel, so we grabbed dinner. And what a lovely guy. And I mean, and sharp as a tack. He's 86. And he's 86, and he was talking about how he remembers recording Yellow Submarine, Mal Evans strapping the big bass drum on and hitting it and all that. Oh my God. I mean, I had to keep reminding myself, like, just stay cool, stay present, stay focused. He just truly was. I'm hoping to convince him maybe to come to a Beatles Fest, because I think you would all really, really like him.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, he just has incredible stories. There were there were presentations on virtually every aspect of Abbey Road you can possibly think of. Walter Everett, who is a musicologist, and he wrote a 2-volume work called The Beatles as Musicians, where he analyzes all the different, every track on every album. Yes, it's technical, but when he presents, he really makes things clear. And he talked about like different melodies that repeat throughout different songs and Abbey Road, and he isolated them and demonstrated. Fascinating. I mean, you just hear stuff you've never heard before.
Is this like deconstructing the Beatles? Like a similar idea?
It's kind of like that. Yeah, kind of like that. And Gary Astridge, he was another highlight. I'm sure many of you have seen him at the fest. Ringo's drum archivist, also just a sweet guy. And he demonstrated some of Ringo's drumming techniques, talked about how he first got hooked up with Ringo, and it was incredible. He talked about the first time he worked on one of Ringo's drums, and it just hit him that, and he said, he is the reason that I became a drummer, that I got involved in music, and he actually teared up and choked up on stage. And there wasn't a dry eye in the house. I mean, it was incredible. I gave a presentation on Oh Darling and its connections to a genre called swamp pop, which was a genre in Southeast Louisiana and Texas, parts of South Texas. And it's basically, if you've heard the song Sea of Love, if you remember that song, that's basically swamp pop. It's R&B, country, Zydeco, and Cajun kind of mixed into one. And I talked about how you can hear that in Oh Darling, and I talked about the ways that the Beatles may have encountered swamp pop, including from Clarence Frogman Henry, which I'm sure many of you remember that name. He recorded it too.
So we got Kid O'Toole, Queen of Swamp Pop as well.
That's right, exactly. And in fact,
I didn't even know I liked swamp pop. Now that I know that Sea of Love, I love that song.
You know what? I almost called the presentation "The Music You Don't Know That You Know." Because when you hear the examples, "Sea of Love," they're like, "Oh, please come home." Yeah, "Please Come Home for Christmas" is another one, the original version. It's so and that went really well. Had a great audience for that. So it was smaller. It was a little more, it was a little more. It was more academic. Even more academic. I mean, Monmouth was too, but this was. Some of the presentations were a little technical, but the vast majority of them were fascinating and really made me listen to the album, to Abbey Road, in a brand new way. So I was so glad to have been there. It was just a fascinating weekend.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Great, thanks.
Go ahead.
Just one thing, because you mentioned Clarence Frogman Henry. I know him for the song "But I Do."
Yes,
which was and when I heard that years ago, it's so Fats Domino. He sounds like Fats Domino on there. I think that might have been a big influence on him. So would you say Fats Domino is part of the swamp pop as well?
Absolutely. Blueberry Hill. Listen to Blueberry Hill, and a lot of the elements of swamp pop are in that. The piano, the triplet chords. I mean, it's all. So yes, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I do talk about that in the presentation. That Fats Domino is a big figure. I may be doing this presentation in March at the New Jersey Fest.
Okay.
So if anybody out there is coming, hopefully we're all going to be there. I'll be doing it then. So it's really I think you'd enjoy it. I do.
Cool.
Yeah.
I think you got one more thing to announce as well, Kit.
Yes, I do. And I had a commenter say earlier, I want to know what Kit's news is. So so we finally, I know I have said so many times on here, the different platforms we're on, and I kept saying iHeartRadio, I've not been able to get us on there. We're finally on there. We are now on iHeartRadio. I'm so excited to finally get it done. So we are. I will put the link up on our page, of course, at the end of the show, and you can get all of our episodes. They're all there. Please spread the word, because it's a little hard to find if you don't know, exactly where to look. So when I send out the link, please tell all your friends and family. So if you are an iHeartRadio app user, hallelujah, we're finally.
Okay.
We'll all be sharing the link. So
That's
everyone
right.
can find it. So.
Absolutely.
All right. So are we ready for our main topic?
Let's do this.
Okay. Anybody want to know what the main topic is? Oh, you know what it is. Okay.
Let it be.
Okay. Abbey, I was going to say, you see, I'm honoring the album. Abbey Road, reissued, following in the footsteps of what we've had the last couple of years. We had Sgt. Pepper in 2017, the White Album. We had in 2018, and now by Giles Martin and Sam O'Kell, the remix of Abbey Road in time for the 50th. And I have to tell you, the reason that I'm wearing this shirt is for two reasons. One of them was because I just wanted to freak people out. Like, you have the wrong album. No, but mainly because I don't have an Abbey Road shirt. That's the main reason I'm wearing it. But anyway, I thought maybe we could go around and one at a time maybe, and first talk about the album itself, the new edition of this album, what we all think of some of the tracks, the highlights, and if there's any low lights, something maybe you don't care for as much or whatever, the pros, cons, anything. Then after that, if we have time, hopefully we will, a lot to cover, we'll go into some of the bonus stuff that's on the sessions discs and things, okay? So why don't we start with Tom? You go first.
I'd be more than happy to. Thank you very much, Joe. And, one of my favorite sayings is what do you get the person that has everything? Because I feel like this album already has everything, before. And I don't think it really needed this remix, but we've got it. I think it's a good thing we've got it. But as we all said with these remixes, they shouldn't be considered the be all to end all. So it's cool that we have this, but we should still consider the 2009 release as the ultimate release on this album. For me personally, it's my favorite vocal album. I love all of the singing on this album. It's just tremendous. I think the one thing that really stands out on this new remix is the backing vocals, which just really just comes out clear and clean. Now, I will say I spent a lot of time listening to both versions back to back, track by track, and I will say the 2009 mix, to me, to my ears, it plays louder than this remix. So I think with this remix, it sounded like they brought like the main vocals down a little bit, and then that way we were able to get those backing vocals a little more clear. Obviously we talk about the bass and drums that are starting to be the norm now as one of the highlights that are being lifted up a little bit from the mix. But all in all, I think this was a good job. I'll go through a couple songs where I think stood out for me. I'll go over just my three favorite songs on the album real quick. We'll start with Something, which if you listen to the 2009, the drum intro by Ringo, I think just comes out a lot stronger than this mix. I think the intro with Ringo's drums is a little softer. I don't know if it works as much. But I do feel like George's vocals, that is, are brought down a little bit, and the harmonies are brought up, and especially the strings on this track, I think, are a little bit more present on Something as well, which made it a little bit more enjoyable. I know we've got the isolated strings on here as well, as one of the I think it's on CD3, I believe, which is just the strings. I think that was a nice addition to hear those. And like I said, the drums, I think throughout the whole thing feel a little softer. I don't think they feel the same as the 2009, but that's okay. Again, You Never Give Me Your Money is another song that I consider to be one of my favorites on this album. Funny thing is too about this mix is you can tell by listening to it on headphones that they go back and forth a little differently than on the 2009. And one of the things that I noticed on here was the opening Paul's opening piano on "You Never Give Me Your Money," where you can just hear it on the 2009 in one channel, but on this mix you hear it coming out from both, and that seemed to be a little bit more enjoyable to my ears. And then again with Paul's vocals, I think is a real highlight for this album, especially with the backing vocals on this as well. One thing I've noticed too is that towards the end is the guitar solo that's kind of extended a little bit. I think you hear a little bit more than what you do on the 2009 mix. So that's a little bit something to look out for. And another one that's into my ears is just a little different, but still a little bit enjoyable is "I Want You, She's So Heavy," where on that first verse of "I Want You," you hear a lot of hiss, in my opinion, on that 2009 mix. But here, that hiss is kind of gone away on that. And then you really, I think, notice Billy Preston's organ playing on this on that version. And then I'm sure we'll get to,
we will.
Oh yeah, as one of the highlights of the of this album. But and then so those are just like three songs that to my ears have slight differences from the 2009, and those are the three songs that I gravitated right away when I got this album, just to see what kind of differences they were. There's other differences too, but I'm sure I just want to leave you guys some songs to talk about as well. So those are my three, and we'll go from there.
Okay, very good, very good. Okay, Kit, how about you?
Well, I have to echo you, Tom, on "I Want You, She's So Heavy." I thought that really benefited from the remix. I think John's vocals are higher up in the mix, and you can really, particularly if you're listening on headphones or
Right.
system, I mean, you hear every rasp,
Right.
his voice. You can really hear him, emoting. I mean, and I really don't, I mean, I've heard it before, but now with this remix, you really hear. You can hear Billy Preston's organ, as you mentioned, much clearer. And the other thing too is Ringo's drumming really benefits on this remix of Abbey Road. To me, it sounds like he's in the room with you.
Yeah,
He's really like, you can hear, just every little, using the whole surface almost, and hearing the different tones and the different, skins he used. And I mean, you really hear it. It's just so clear on this. And "I Want You, She's So Heavy" is a great example of that. Even I think the Moog, white noise at the end, I think they seem to have brought up the music a bit at the end. So the white noise doesn't totally overwhelm it,
Right.
like it did in the other remix. And so to me, that I don't know how else to put it. It made more sense if that if that makes any sense. I mean, I just felt like it really demonstrated this feeling of this feeling, this passion that John was communicating, kind of gradually enveloping the music. I mean, I'm probably reading too much into it, but that's what the remix did for me. Yeah, I thought that was great, because I thought that voice. The voices are the stars of that, and they should be, and you really hear that, even more in this remix. And I thought it was interesting, the Sun King, you could hear the sound effects between "You Never Give Me Your Money" and Sun King much clearer, that transition. I mean, there were some sounds in there I had never really noticed before. Right before, and then there was also an organ part that I'd never noticed before, right before they start speaking, the foreign language section. Never noticed that before. Carry That Weight. I'm like, wow, you can really hear Ringo singing. I've never been able to hear that. I mean, I heard the others, but boy, I mean, you could really hear Ringo in this remix. I mean, I heard his voice very clearly. And then finally, the end, I think they did a nice job of remixing the strings and horns. I mean, I think you hear them a lot better, and it just adds to the drama. So for me, a lot of the stuff on here, I would say the remixes, they're not dramatic. I mean, some of the White Album remixes for me, were like some of them like Long, Long, Long or something. I thought, wow, this, I mean, that just had a huge impact on me. Just made me listen in a new way. Don't know if the Abbey Road remixes did that for me exactly, but I like how they clarified some of the parts and made Ringo's drumming sound warmer, more, the tone more rounded. And I really appreciate it. So
and I like what you said, kid, about the skins, because I didn't know how to word my feelings. Almost like I could hear the skins,
right?
The skins. Some parts really, really crisp, really, really good. Okay, thank you very much. And Ken, what are your feelings?
I like the new remix a lot. I think just about all the instrumentation is clearer. You can hear separation more of all the different instruments. Though it's been said many times, I think the bass and the drums really benefit. It's brought up more in the mix. But like Tom was saying, I think Josh Martin was very, I don't know, he really wanted to bring up the backing vocals a lot more on this album. And that really is the biggest change I heard from me on something like "Oh Darling," where you hear ooze in there that maybe you never heard before. I hear more backing vocals in Maxwell Silver Hammer. There's more in "Here Comes the Sun." I like the new remix. I don't think there'll ever be a time when I say to myself, I prefer the new remix, because there was nothing wrong with the original mix. And the 2009 mix I thought was, pretty darn close to perfect. There are times when I'm like, I have oh wow moments, like when the drums kick in at the very beginning of something. It's just amazing. I love, if you notice, the very end of "Come Together" is a little bit longer. And there's a few more vocal ad libs from John that I hadn't heard before. It's only a few seconds longer, but when you've heard these songs 1,000 times, the slightest little difference you're going to pick up. But listen to that in headphones if you can, because it does go on a little bit longer. You mentioned the skins on the drums. Ringo himself pointed out, listen to "Bathroom Window." You can really hear it on there. Really, the drums are brought up in that particular song. I really liked it. I'm glad it's out there. I'm glad that I have an alternative if I don't feel like hearing the original mix. But I don't know if from now on I'm going to be turning to this version, because I like having a choice. And the more I listen to the new remix, the more I'll discover some new things. But I'm pleased with it. But it's like one of those albums where there was less to really work on.
Right.
This is true.
It's kind of like whenever you're doing remastering of newer albums, say the McCartney series, the newer the album is, the less work there is to do. There's less cleaning up to do. So it's kind of the same thing. I mean, Abbey Road was an album of perfection as far as I'm concerned in the way that it was recorded and mixed. So, but I like these few changes.
I think it's interesting enough to keep our attention for the most part, but I definitely feel that maybe like you said, Kid, I think the White Album remix may have been a little bit more interesting, or a little bit more wow factor on that one than this.
It didn't have that, or even some parts of Sgt. Pepper. I mean, there were some of the Sgt. Pepper remixes that I thought, wow, that really made, like "Within You, Without You" or something. I mean, that was kind of a revelation to me in a way. I mean, the remix was just so crisp, so good and detailed. And this, as you all pointed out, the quality was kind of already there in this case. Was 8-track. I will say this though, that I think this remix to me, and I'm trying to think of how to put this. It kind of, I don't know. A lot of these songs sound warmer to me. Somehow.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I felt the
Yeah.
same way because especially from the 2009 mix where I thought it sounded louder. I think, like you're right. I think it does have a little bit more warming factor on this one than the 2009. I think that's a really good word to use to describe it.
Yeah, because I just feel like, even, I mean, I remember first hearing it on cassette back in the 80s. And even then, it sounded, it was so different than the other Beatles recordings that it almost sounded, I don't know, I'm trying to think, I mean, this sounds pretty harsh, but I don't know, almost clinical or something, where you noticed that, wow, this is a world leap forward in recording and everything's so crisp and clear, and that's great. This remix to me really, and the 2009 to an extent too, kind of took away some of that clinical kind of sound and made you more just appreciate the roundness of the tones and that sort of thing. So so that in that way the remix did appeal.
Gotcha.
Okay. Well, just to give some of my own thoughts towards this, I think out of the 3 releases that came out so far, this is my favorite. And maybe that's because it wasn't really as drastic in some cases. I mean, the Giles Martin mixes, to me, are always hit and miss, going back to even when they did some songs on the one, the one version. I have the feeling when I listen to these that, I love when you can hear the original stuff that you've always heard, brighter, louder, more clear. That's always something that I'm looking for. And I also like when I hear new things that I haven't heard before. A good example of that is something Ken started bringing up. To me, the thing that blew me away the most out of the whole album was "Oh Darling." The oohs that Ken was referring to, without singing them for you, I heard this song like everybody else. I've heard this song zillions of times. I don't even know they were there. Now I know the ahs are there. There's 2 different things. There's oohs as he start, especially on the second verse. "Oh darling," the oohs come in loud, and then I listen to the ah part, as I've always known that was there. But I never even knew the oohs were there at the beginning. It almost sounded like they were put in for the first time, which was probably not true, but that's how blown away I was by that. That's what really impressed me. And as I said at the beginning here, I'm always into the idea of making things that you already know louder, more vibrant and stuff, and more clear. And bring up some new stuff like the user. That's great, but just don't omit things that I'm used to hearing. You hear these so many times. Something people have been talking about a lot is at the end of "Come Together," John's famous growl or whatever he says, or whatever. And people have pointed out to me on my channel, it's still there. It's just very low in the back. This might as well not be there if I have to strain to hear it. It's a small thing, but when you're used to hearing a song for 50 years or whatever it's been, you kind of miss it. I've noticed that with a lot of these works. I could. We're not talking about other albums. We're not talking about other songs now from other places. But there's things that I do miss. In this version of "I Want You, She's So Heavy," to my ears, some of the times when they're repeating "heavy, heavy, heavy" a few times, I couldn't really hear them as loud, those words being said over and over again. I thought kind of buried a little bit with all the instrumentation being improved. So it's like a hit and a miss. But I mean, overall, with the drums the way they are, I mean, so pronounced, the bass, that's worth the price of admission as far as I'm concerned. And the harmonies that everybody has said. It even brought up the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All good children go to heaven. I'm like, I didn't know, and it's like that too. It's like, did I need that louder? I don't know, but it's interesting. I mean, if it's going to be exactly the same, what's the point in a way of having? You want to have something a little different. But to me, it's a hit and miss thing. But I overall, for all my quibbles, was happy with this. I just thought it sounded more alive, more, dare I say, today. It just sounded more like something I could imagine being a modern album. And there wasn't much to do, as we've discussed. with this particular release, right? As much as there was maybe some other ones. So it didn't. It was pretty good as it already was. So I don't. I think that's why I liked it the best. I really didn't hear anything too drastic that really made me think, "Oh, wow, this is not the way I really remember it," and
Right.
that's why it's my favorite. Um, yeah. So that's. I guess we already covered the album. I'm surprised we did it
Yeah.
so fast. I'm looking at the time here. But yeah, I'm told any more notes? Nah, no,
Yeah.
that's it. Just the
I
good and the
will say
bad.
another thing I noticed as well was on Her Majesty, where on the 2009, when you first start hearing him sing Her Majesty's a Pretty Nice Girl, it's a little bit more of an echo on that. On this one, it's there's really no echo at all. It's really clear and more close sounding than that 2009 mix.
I know another thing
Yeah.
I remember that I wanted to mention is I Want You She's So Heavy Again. When John did that loud yeah at the end,
Yeah,
I think that was
yeah,
already improved though on the 2009. Am I right? That there's no
I think so.
overmodulation or crackling.
Yeah.
There was always this kind of distortion, and that's gone now. I think it was gone on 2009 as well. I haven't revisited that in a while, the 2009 version. All right,
Yeah.
so why don't we then discuss some of the extras, of which there are many.
Yeah.
Not as many as past releases. Maybe it's not as big. This whole overall package is somewhat less, but I'm all right with that. But let's go around and see what you think. We're going to start this time with let's do Ken with the extras.
I like
What do you
all
like?
of them. I mean, when I
Go.
first got the box set, I just went right to the extras. I cared more
Yeah.
about that than
Sure.
the remix. But I like so many aspects of it. I like hearing songs when they're stripped down, when you
Hmm.
just hear something like, even though it's not an Abbey Road song, but like the Ballad of John and Yoko with just John and Paul,
Mm.
and John playing acoustic guitar and Paul on drums and nothing
Drums.
else. It's really cool to hear that. You know, Old Brown Shoe. Okay, without the full band playing, it has a different vibe altogether. One of the things, and I pointed this out in my other podcast show, that I found really interesting about the Abbey Road songs is that some of them were rehearsed during the Let It Be sessions,
Right.
but you learn from these early takes that from the get go, the arrangements didn't change all that much. They
No,
pretty
that was
much knew
yeah.
what they
Right.
were going to do. I
Yep.
mean, Mean Mr. Mustard is slower in the very
Hmm.
beginning, like in this early take, but they obviously felt that they had to speed it up a bit. But that's one of the things. But even though it's not a different arrangement, you still learn something about how they approach these songs. Even if you go back to the Beatles Anthology Volume 3, where they have take one of Come Together, it's pretty close to how Come Together was finished.
Yep.
They're very similar in the takes. I like
Mm.
all the different outtakes. I love hearing songs that you're used to hearing with strings and brass, and they're not there, and it's just the band. I love Golden Slumbers, Carry That Weight, the few takes of that. It's really cool to hear it just like that when it's just the band and nothing else. It
Hmm.
has a completely different vibe altogether.
Hmm.
I love that alternate take of "You Never Give Me Your Money." That's one of my favorite moments
Yeah.
of all the outtakes, and it's nice to hear it when it's missing something, like the honky tonk piano in the middle of the song, and not having the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 part. It's just the band going through like a run through of the song, but everything is structured as the way the song was going to appear without those few things. So to hear it with less, it's still very interesting. I like hearing just the orchestration that George Martin gave to something, hearing that alone, because I think something as a song where you may not be as much aware of how much the orchestration mattered to that song. It's very understated, you know, and I kind of find it interesting that for whatever reason, something is the only song in this box set where we don't have any alternate take of the band doing it. It's
Yeah.
only the
Mm.
demo. And I wonder
Right.
why that is. I don't know if anybody has asked Giles Martin that question. But to hear the orchestration on just something, and there's a part where you hear the strings plucking away, that's pizzicato, that I never heard before. in the final mix that we've come to know all these years. To hear the orchestration on Golden Slumbers and Carry That Weight, you've heard it in the background. Now it stands by itself. And in many ways, it reminds me of the different orchestrations that we heard on the Imagine box set for Imagine and How Do You Sleep,
Right.
when they isolate just that.
Yeah.
Or even on other, Beatles releases, Within You, Without You, which is
Yeah.
like, it's a real treat to hear just the Indian instruments playing. And then you also have just the Western instruments playing in the background. Both of that isolated that we've gotten through the years, that kind of thing. There's quite a lot. I like the demos. I mean, Goodbye is nothing new for all of us who have heard the bootleg. It's still the same, but it's nice to know that it's officially out.
Yep.
Come and Get It. I really got to listen more carefully because this is actually the original mix of Come and Get It, whereas what was on the Beatles anthology was a different mix that Jeff Emmerich made originally for sessions, which they used on the Beatles anthology. So that kind of thing. There's a lot of highlights all throughout. That's just a few of them. I love Here Comes the Sun. Just the band doing it without hearing the Moog synthesizer on there.
Yeah. Ringo's still working out the drum parts on there. I mean, it's still,
it's really nice. And it's a very difficult song to drum to, that middle part with all the different time signatures there. And so, but even still, George knew what he wanted on the song. It was only towards the end that he added the Moog.
Right.
Oh, how can you not talk about I Want You, She's So Heavy? Just to hear Billy Preston's organ playing, which is brought up in the mix, and I actually wish it would be even hotter.
Right.
It's that good. And it made me want to hear more of that in the version that we've known on Abbey Road. I think added a lot to the song. So that's just some of them, of the highlights for me.
Okay. How about you now, Tom? Let's see what you've got to say about it.
Yeah, this again, like Ken, I went straight for these demos and session takes and all that. This is for me the highlight of all of these box sets that have been coming out. I love the chatter, at the beginning and the end of these songs that they've been adding, lately. Yes. Especially on the Ballad of John and Yoko, where you hear John jokingly, say, play a little faster, Ringo, and Paul says, "Okay, George." I mean, that's fun. And I just and I just like to point out the fact that the Ballad of John and Yoko, where it's just those two, and how important that is, because I don't think there will ever be another time that it was just them two in the studio again together playing. And and the fact that they were having a great time in the midst of all of their business troubles. And they were able to knock this song out and have a great time doing it. Like you said, Ken, it's great to finally have a good an official release of Goodbye. I always enjoyed that. Let's see here, Come and Get It. 1 hour it took him to complete this song, Paul, and it just, and was it, correct me if I'm wrong, Ken, ended up being a top 5 hit for Badfinger in the UK?
In the UK, I'm not sure. In the US, it was number 7, I think.
Okay, but I think it may have hit the top 5 for the UK in the UK. But cool story was, Paul was commissioned to do 3 songs for the Magic Christian, and they were worried about Badfinger's career, so Paul decided to give Badfinger this song and say, "Look, you do it right this way, and then I'll let you guys write the other 2 songs for the movie as well." So they jumped on that, and it was a hit, just like he promised. I love the vocals that Paul does on "You Never Give Me Your Money," where it's almost more like a falsetto voice that we didn't hear until later on, and from like Girlfriend or So Bad. I thought that was pretty cool. And she came in through the bathroom window. You get different fills from Ringo on that one, and it's always cool to hear him play drums on any song and see what he comes up with, and that was a lot of fun as well. Right. So yeah, those were a few of the. And Oh Darling too, Paul working out the vocals on that on take 4. I mean, how many more times would he do that song before he finally got it the way he wanted? So
and Ringo and Paul really there sync.
Right.
So I really like that.
Right.
Okay, Kit.
Well, you mentioned "Oh Darling," and I actually used that take four in my
Okay.
presentation because his vocals, Paul's vocals on that version are actually closer to true swamp pop than the
Ah,
final version was, because that
okay.
the kind of bluesy screaming that's not a typical swamp pop sound. It's a little smoother. So actually, I played take four in my presentations. I'm like, this is actually closer,
Hmm.
like really close to swamp pop. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's a great one. I also I of course I loved "I Want You, She's So Heavy" with Billy Preston just going to town on the organ. I mean, he was incredible talent. I'm a huge fan, so it was just wonderful to hear this. I just was thrilled. That to me was worth the price of admission. I mean, it really.
Amen.
Yeah, really. The demo for Something, that just beautiful. I mean, it's almost as good as the final version. I mean,
Yeah,
George's
very
vocal
nice.
isn't 100% perfect, but but it's almost there. And to just hear him accompanied by piano and guitar, I mean, it's just simple. I love the final version, but this was just, I mean, it just sounded like he was in the living room, in your living room, singing this to you.
And they made sure with this demo version, because there was the demo on Anthology 3,
Mm-hmm,
but this one they added the piano, so
yep.
there was a difference. So.
Yes, exactly. And the piano is stunning. I mean, it really is. I enjoyed the take two of "Old Brown Shoe." I thought George sounded like he was having a lot of fun. And we know, stories surrounding this
You're right.
album that, shall we say, George was feeling frustrated at various times. But to hear him really just sound like he's having fun, and I love hearing, on the final version, obviously his voice sounds quite a bit different, with singing in the control room and all, as I recall, saying there. And here it's just a straightforward vocal, and I just thought you could just really feel his joy in recording it. It's a lot of fun. And can we talk about the long one, trial and mix?
Yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, to me, I was fascinated listening to this. I think I have heard before on the internet or something somewhere where, somebody edited Her Majesty back
Right.
into the mix. So that part wasn't, a big surprise. Well, it's interesting to hear. But to hear like the voices like before double they were double
Right.
tracked, or
Yeah.
I mean, that like on "You Never Give Me Your Money," you don't hear really much of an echo on there. So very interesting. No double tracking on the One Sweet Dream section. You hear a little Richard yell at one point that I'd never heard before. You just interesting, like no sound effects on the Sun King transition. You just hear an organ chord kind of swirling, or I don't know if maybe that's the Moog. I'm not sure, but it's no crickets chirping, and so you hear that. It's just hearing John's voice not double tracked on Polythene Pam. I didn't know that they edited some extra things. When John said before he said, "Oh, look out," he was saying,
Yes.
"Yeah, I didn't know
That
that."
was interesting.
That was fascinating. So you hear where they did the edit. Golden Slumbers, different Paul vocals. There were some different vocals on that. That was, no strings. The strings weren't added yet. I was just geeking out. I will love that. I loved hearing this because you really, you were saying, Ken, earlier about how you like to hear songs that are in progress, that are being put
Right.
together.
Yeah.
This is a perfect example of that, not only in terms of just performing the songs, but the mixes. You hear how the mixes change so much
Yeah.
during the production. That was just fascinating to me. So that I thought that was, for me, the crowning achievement of this whole package. I
Yeah.
loved it.
The long one is really fascinating because you heard the backing tracks with most of it done. There's things that had to be overdubbed, and you also learn from reading from the booklet here, and also from Mark Lewison's notes through the years, that one of the last things they did was Paul's vocals on the end,
Right.
the backing vocals when they had to sing "Love You," the guitar solos. in the end, those are among the last things that they recorded. So it's just nice to hear it without all that. Here's the backing tracks. Add to this,
And you bring up Love Yous, and I noticed that was another thing on the remix that they brought up a little bit more too on
yes,
on the end, the Love Yous I noticed.
Yeah.
What about the guitar solos? Everybody was saying they're moved. I don't know who's in the
Channel
left.
to
Somebody's
channel.
in the center. Somebody's in the right.
That I'm not sure about.
I mean, somebody
To be
said that.
honest.
I don't know what they were before.
I'll
You were gonna
listen
say
more
something,
carefully
Ken?
now. Yeah, I wanted to say something about Old Brown Shoe, and it's really bothering me. Do you know where I'm going? Do you know where I'm going, Tom?
Yeah, I do.
As I said in our last show, I'm a real stickler for accuracy. And back in 1988, when George was promoting Cloud9, he gave an interview to Cream magazine, and he said in that interview that he played the bass on Old Brown Shoe. Now, you look at the notes here that Kevin Howlett did, and it mentions, first of all, that Ringo wasn't even on the sessions and that Paul plays the drums on Old Brown Shoe. Okay. And it also says that Paul plays the bass and that John plays the piano. Okay. But gosh, if you can't even believe the songwriter saying it, I don't understand it. I mean, if you listen to the bass line in Old Brown Shoe on this earlier take, it's the bass line is done on the acoustic strings, the nylon strings. So it's practically copied on the electric bass. And I always thought, until George said this, that really sounds like Paul playing the bass. And it says in Kevin Howlett's notes that's Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've used this in trivia questions because George said this.
Yep.
He's the songwriter. So I hope that the documentation that they have there at Abbey Road is totally accurate. Because, it's not just the fact that the Beatles should know what they play on their own instruments, but it's George's own song.
Yeah.
George said this.
Yeah.
So I would think he wouldn't be wrong about his own song, but it's not there in the notes.
Yeah.
Well, just playing devil's advocate. Remember that bit in Anthology when they couldn't tell who played the bass on something? And they were all in the studio in that extra footage trying to figure out who played the bass. I don't know. I guess you did.
Well,
something.
Ken, I was listening to you on Things We Said Today talking about that.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about that. And, all of the, mistruths or however you want to say it. And then I'm just thinking about it. I honestly think there's just too much to remember by heart with these guys. I don't know how you can remember every single session, whether you're the songwriter or not, and especially with all of the, the problems they had going on outside of the studio as well. I just really find it hard to believe that, 19 years later, George can remember exactly, who played what on a song when they had all this turmoil going on, outside of the studio as well.
It's possible, but here you're also dealing with a situation where he's not playing his usual instrument. Actually, he does the lead guitar solo in Old Brown Shoe. So if it's something that he doesn't normally play, and he does play bass on other songs, I think he plays the bass on Golden Slumbers, for example. You'd think that should stick out in his memory, I would think.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah. No, this
is a big change, right? George playing bass. I mean, wouldn't that be something that he would stick out in George's mind?
I would think so. I would think so.
Yeah. It's funny. This very topic actually came up during the conference where we were saying, how much can we rely on the original source? Normally, you would absolutely rely on it. But, we know from a lot of John's interviews, it kind of depended on his mood. and then you're dealing with memory, and also it's really, it can be, it can be tricky, but I see what you're saying that, you'd think if he played bass on it, an instrument he didn't normally, or he didn't play very much, to say the least, that he'd remember it. But, who knows? It's hard to say.
Or was he talking about?
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
You first. Really?
No, I'm just saying, or because unfortunately I haven't really got to all that book either. But was he just talking about that particular take, or was he talking about that song in general?
The song in general. I would think he
Okay.
meant the released version.
That's what I thought.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll have to go back
Yeah,
and
yeah.
read that.
That's what I would think.
Yeah.
I was going to say, well, you three did a great job. I don't know what's left for me to comment on, but that's the only drawback of being moderator, I guess. This is my first time, so I get you go last. But I just want to say something. I'm going to reiterate what you've said. That I Want You, She's So Heavy. And that's, the bonuses start with that. And it was hard for anything to even match that after I heard that. I was so blown away by that Billy Preston organ.
Yeah.
I wish that. So why the heck didn't they do that and leave that on the whole original take of that? That's so fantastic.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's so otherworldly, something like so cool and modern for the time and psychedelic. It was so amazing. I just was like spellbound by it. I had to say that. I really loved that. That was my favorite thing on all of the sessions take. And of course, Ballad of John and Yoko, as we said, I love this rapport between John and Paul, maybe the last hurrah, so to speak, and joking about Ringo and George and everything like that. I like John's vocals being really like well enunciated. It's funny because again, I mentioned my girlfriend from time to time. We were listening to these together, and with that particular track, she said, "I really like that one the best. I really like the way John sounded on that." And I said, "Yeah, so do I." And I like too that I always appreciated that. Paul, maybe, he had the mixed feelings, maybe, Yoko coming into the studio and all that and being around it, but yet he went in there to support John, really, for that song that's really about that. And I'm also amazed. I don't think I knew until I was looking at the book that it says the name of it was "They're Gonna Crucify Me," the working title. It's kind of like highlighted instead of "Ballad of John and Yoko," which I kind of think is a better title, "Ballad of John and Yoko."
Yeah.
But I was fascinated by that. I hadn't known about that before.
It's in this book right here, Joe. If you open
Oh,
this
did you
one
write
up,
that book, Tom? Oh,
no, I wish I wrote that
no,
book.
I'm trying. I missed your credit at the beginning. No, I'm just kidding. And of course, Come and Get It. So to me, so much superior to the one personally that we're familiar with, and it's clear. It's so much more clear anyway. Not much else. Everything else, you pretty much nailed what I was saying. I gotta always throw in a few things like Her Majesty. Nice to have 3 takes of Her Majesty. I don't know if I needed them, but it was nice to have those 3.
Yeah.
The long one, everything that you said, Kit, really is how I feel about that. Very interesting for all the reasons you pointed out. But I think Paul made a good call, and I believe it was Paul who said, take out Her Majesty.
Yeah.
But could that be because we're so accustomed to not hearing it in there? I just think it really just stopped it, but we're so used to it the other way. So I think it was a good call.
Do you know why originally it was placed there?
Because somebody saved it. It was Jeff Emmerich who saved it at the end. Somebody saved it.
No,
at the end
I'm talking about why it was originally part of that medley.
What was that?
Because Alan Kozin talked about this on Things We Said Today. In Mean Mr. Mustard, you hear the line, "Takes him out to look at the Queen." So they wanted to follow that with another song.
Right.
Dealing with royalty or the Queen.
Right.
So, but and why would they stick something that short? It's not like it's a full song, but
it's but I agree, Joe. It just took just stopped the whole thing in its tracks, and
we're so used to it the other way too. I mean, I don't know what anybody would think if they'd never heard this medley somehow before, a new young person or something. But. And then I might just mention this for posterity because people have been saying this. Well, I wonder why we didn't get the "Here Comes the Sun" lead solo version.
Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, I'm happy with what we have. Look at the positive. I get that, but to try to balance it a little bit. I just thought I would ask that. I'm happy, but I really thought that was going to be on there. I was surprised.
Well, if you don't mind me saying real quick, Joe, one of my gripes about this is that now that vinyl sales are starting to outsell CDs and whatnot, I noticed that these sets or the outtakes, the bonus discs, they're starting to make them where they're just enough time so they can fit on vinyl as well. So these two discs are only in the 40-minute range when. So they've got plenty more space to fit more stuff on these CDs, but I feel like this might become a trend where they're going to, have these second and third discs, and they're going to have them, in time so they can fit them on vinyl as well, so they can make it more affordable, for the vinyl community as well. So I think that's why we're probably where we are with the bonus material.
It's possible.
Yeah. All right. Well, any last thoughts? We missed.
I agree with what you were talking about with Billy Preston. I wish the Beatles gave Billy Preston more of a chance to shine on Beatle records, and certainly on "I Want You, She's So Heavy," where he's doing these solos.
Right.
And what he played on songs like "Get Back" and "Don't Let Me Down" were perfect. But for a song like "I Want You, She's So Heavy," that lends itself to doing solos and to jamming, is perfect for that. So I do kind of wish that he was mixed up hotter on the release version. So yeah. But at least they gave you an alternate take of every single song. And even though this is something that I bring up all the time, I think it's something we kind of take for granted. I really love the whole idea that on these outtakes, everything is presented chronologically as the Beatles recorded it. It gives you a different understanding. Who would think that they would start with "I Want You, She's So Heavy" of all the songs? It's kind of like saying, "Gee, Revolver, we'll start with Tomorrow Never Knows." It's you wouldn't think that, but when you
and that was the first track recorded for Revolver, wasn't it?
Yeah, the first one they worked on.
Yeah.
But just to hear it in the order that the Beatles recorded it in gives you a whole different feel, to the whole thing. Yeah.
Cool.
A lot of good comments here, by the way. We didn't bring up many of them, but I saw they were being highlighted, and I enjoyed a lot of the comments here.
Yeah, we'll go back, and we always do. We go back after the show and look at the comments and respond to them. We can't always get to them all on the air, but we really appreciate. Yeah, there's some great comments here. You're right.
Yeah,
I tell you, as we wrap up a little bit, Ken, I wanted to just say, when you had said at the news part that it looks like we're going to get number 3 position on Billboard in the States for this release. I was a little surprised on that. I thought this one would be number 1 because you're always seeing Abbey Road come back into the chart. It seems like this album, more than any other for some reason, always seems to make the charts again and pop in. I thought this one is going to make number 1. I'm glad I didn't bet on it. I mean, at least in the U.S. Otherwise, I would have lost my shirt. But the U.K., it's number 1, UK, so it is a number 1 album.
Yeah, it's still respectable, no matter how you look at it. It's a 50-year-old album.
Absolutely.
I think it benefited by having, less discs than the White Album. The more expensive it is, it's not as likely to chart as high. And I think the White Album, it went as high as 6. I'm not sure when it was reissued. And I think Sgt. Pepper went to number 3. But no matter how you skin the cat, this is something to be proud of that they debuted at number 3 here in the States. Tells you the power of the music. And when you consider the fact that, radio, whether you think radio is as much an influence as it used to be, they're not as likely to play all these outtakes, on commercial radio. You got to rely on Beatle specials.
That's where the multiple versions of Breakfast with the Beatles all over the country takes place, where they'll play all of these different outtakes and demos. So because there's a few out there, aren't there? Different Breakfast with the Beatles on
with the same title. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
but there's only one Every Little Thing.
Yeah,
that's right. Don't you forget it.
There's only one. Well, on that note of one Every Little Thing, why don't we all go around and talk about our what we're doing lately and where you could find us and so on. And let's start with Kit.
Well, as always, you can find me on Facebook, and you find out what I'm up to. Now that I'm back from the conference, I will be getting back to my columns. So I will have Deep Beatles and Deep Soul will be coming up very soon. I'm also going to be appearing on a couple of other podcasts in the near future. Tomorrow Never Knows is one of them, and I'm going to be on one with, and I don't know if he's still here, but Scott Erickson. We're going to be on one together.
All right, cool.
Yeah, that'll be
Hi,
a
Scott.
blast. We'll be yep. Hi, Scott. And so we're going to have a lot of fun. So that's all coming up. So just as always, go to my website, kiddotool.com. You can find me on Facebook and on Twitter, and keep up with all that I'm up to.
Okay. And Tom?
Yeah, thanks, man. Well, a lot of exciting things are happening with Two Legs. Last night we recorded our first video version, so Two Legs are now going to be a video cast, if you will, as well as the podcast. So we recorded an episode with our musical contributor Dylan Seavey, which we premiered our new intro, where he does a really kick-ass version of Karina Kaur, heavy breathing and all, and and we introduced that as our new, or we're going to introduce that as our new intro theme song. And we had him on. He talked about writing and producing these songs, because you can't, if you're on YouTube, you can't necessarily have these songs exactly, or you'll probably get run into some copyright
not a good idea.
or something. Yeah, exactly. So he put his twist on it, and we were really appreciative, and it turned out really good, and we're happy about that. So yeah, Andy Nichols and I, we're really moving forward. Like I said, it's a video cast now too. We got we're going to interview author Adrian Allen this Sunday, so hopefully that'll be out next week, and that'll be video as well. So you can email us at twolegs podcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast on Facebook, and then we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on iTunes now, and then we're also on YouTube. So if you want to go head over to Two Legs, Paul McCartney podcast on YouTube, and subscribe to our channel, I'd really appreciate it. And back to you, Joe.
Okay, and how about you, Ken?
Before I give contact information, I just want to respond to something Mike Hubert just wrote to us. Hopefully the kids will get into the Beatles. I don't know if you guys saw this, but there was a report that Spotify had 1.7 billion streams of Beatles songs this year, and about 30% of those was from a younger demographic. So that's really impressive. And Mike also says, hey, Ken, just had to say, I never realized until recently you've written quite a few books about the Beatles. That's not me. That's Ken Womack, who is our normal co-host, who hasn't been with us for a few shows now, but he writes tremendous books. Ken Womack is the man. Okay.
Ken Michael man on radio.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I just want to say one thing. Since we made this big announcement about iHeartRadio, I have a trivia question on my website, which is directly related to the word heart and solo Beatles. And so to celebrate our debut on iHeartRadio, that's what our trivia question is this week. You can win one of 9 prizes, books, CDs, or DVDs that are listed, including Kit's book, Songs You Were Singing. That's always up there on my Beatles trivia page. My syndicated Beatles show, Every Little Thing, you can find a page on my website that lists all the radio stations that run them. There's almost 40, and when they stream the show, with links to different radio stations and their websites. And my other podcast show, Things We Said Today, we should be doing a session on Thursday this week. It's going to be kind of late, and hopefully will be posted on Friday.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Any hint? Any hint?
We're supposed to be talking about our favorite album covers, Beatles and solo Beatles. And coincidentally, we just did an interview with John Kosh, who is someone who designed the Abbey Road album cover and the back cover, and has had a whole history in the music business of designing album covers, like Hotel California, for example. So he was there in the midst of all this. He did a lot of work for a lot of John's solo stuff. So that will have that interview with John Kosh in the next Things We Said Today, which will be on Podbean and the same places we're on, on YouTube and iTunes.
Awesome.
All right.
And for me, you can always catch me on YouTube. You can subscribe to Mean Mr. Mayo. And I do all kinds of Beatles related stuff, solo Beatles related, other kinds of artists. Do all kinds of finds of Beatles memorabilia, Beatles records, rarities, record store visits, going on digging hunts, all kinds of music related stuff. So I hope to see you there. But thanks a lot for that. And it looks like we pulled it off, folks. We got it. We got it all done in one show.
And
So,
I want to, Mean Mr. Mayo. This is his first time moderating, and he did an awesome job.
Let's hear it for Joe.
Let's hear it for
It
Joe.
was all right. It was.
Yeah.
He did a great job.
We'll bring it.
And whose turn is it next? Not my turn next, right? Somebody else is going to do it. Right?
Oh man, yeah.
It was a fun experience. It was a fun
You did
experience.
a great job. And
Somebody else take us out. I don't know how to take us out. You take us out.
well, you can, and also just a quick reminder: you can find us, of course, on Facebook. You can find us on YouTube, and if you have any ideas for future shows, feedback, we want to hear it. And it's talkmoresolotalk@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter at talkmoretalk1, the number 1, and also we have an account on Instagram. We're sort of figuring out how to work with it, so that'll be coming up soon. But you can definitely find us, and remember to spread the word about iHeartRadio.
Yeah. And right. Kit, you did a great job, Froggy.
No?
I wouldn't even. I don't even hear a frog in you.
Good, because I
sound great.
I thought, I'm gonna.
Okay. Peace and love, everybody.
Yep. Take care.
Peace and love.